Hey everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm actually going to show you a video from my other YouTube channel, Mixing Music Analog. But I wanted to do this little intro and kind of explain what this is. I thought this would be a good video for this audience here as well. What we're doing in this video that you're about to watch is I compared the sound differences between a Presonus Quantum audio interface versus a universal audio interface. The Presonus Quantum is about 1/5 the price of the universal audio. So over on the SSL console, over at Mixing Music Analog, we get kind of a deep dive on can you hear the difference between the conversion, the D to A and A to D converters. And I thought it was really interesting. So I thought a lot of you on this channel might also be in the market for this type of audio interface, and you might find it interesting. So it's about a 25-minute video. It's a little on the long side, but there's a whole kind of a setup so you kind of know what the test is and why I did the test, so on and so forth. And then towards the end of the video, we actually listen to a song from top to bottom, a full 3.5-minute song where I am switching back and forth between the two mixes, one that went through the Apollo, one that went through the Presonus interface, to see if we can hear the difference. So the one thing I want to challenge you, if you're going to watch the video and listen to the test, is when you listen to this test, I highly recommend you do it with your screen shut off, your monitor, or you close your eyes when you're listening to the test. I don't tell you in the video which one is which. That is coming in a follow-up video over at the Mixing Music Analog YouTube channel, so you may want to subscribe over there as well. But when you're listening to the two mixes side by side, even though you don't know which one is which, close your eyes and do a blindfold test. Okay, I switched back and forth between those mixes probably 10 times during the course of the test. And if you can see when I'm muting and unmuting the tracks, okay, it's interesting how we listen with our eyes and not with our ears. You know, you may convince yourself your brain may try to convince yourself that, hey, he's switching between the two. There should be some sound difference. I think you'll be really, really surprised if you do it with your eyes closed. So that's what the video you're about to see is. I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know in the comments below if you thought the video was cool and if you actually heard a difference and what your thoughts are around this topic. And also make sure that you subscribe over to Mixing Music Analog if you like to see more in-depth videos like that where we test out gear, we test out the differences between analog gear and plugins and those kinds of things. A lot of that is done over there. If you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, I'll leave the link in the description box for that YouTube channel. You could check me out over there as well. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com, and here on my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to do a really interesting test, and I want to talk to you and tell you a little story behind this test and how it all came about. But the bottom line is we are going to shoot out the difference in sound quality, if there is any, between the Universal Audio Apollo x16 I/O that I'm using here on the console versus a Presonus Quantum I/O. That's what we're going to do. We're going to test, we're going to run some audio through both units. We're going to listen to them side by side and see, is there any real sound difference between a Universal Audio Apollo x16, which costs about 6 times as much or 5 times as much as a Presonus Quantum 4848. So that's what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons and the features of each unit. Also going to tell you a little of the backstory of why I'm doing this test. And then we're going to listen to some sound samples at the end. So it might be a little bit of a long video, but hey, if you're on this channel and you support what we do here, you know I don't care about the video length. I care about getting you the information, and hopefully it is helpful to some of you. So before we get to that, if you like what you see in the video, please hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to me if you hit the subscribe button and you follow what I'm doing here. Also, go out to mixingmusicanalog.com if you want to check out what I have going on over there. So again, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and follow along at Mixing Music Analog. So let's head over here and let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing here. So how did this all come about? Well, about a week or two ago, by the time you guys are watching this video, I had done a video on the Home Recording Made Easy YouTube channel where I was showing how you use Studio One with an analog mixer. A lot of people watched that video, very popular video, and I showed it on this SSL console, but the method of the way you use Studio One and the way you hook up your interfaces, your I/O to Studio One, and how you route the audio in and out of your mixer, it's exactly the same whether you're using a full console or whether you're using just a little desktop mixer or anything in between. So it was was good information. People really liked it. The people at Presonus actually saw that video and thanked me very much for doing it and said it's awesome that you showed how to integrate Studio One with an analog mixer. Not many people have done that. It was very helpful. And they said, however, kind of in a jokingly fashion, it would have been nice to see our Quantum 4848 hooked up with Studio One in your console as opposed to the Universal Audio units. But thanks anyway for the video. They shared it around social media and they're really happy with it. Now, up till that moment, I have heard of the Presonus Quantum. Their interface that had preamps on it. They're more high-end interface. I've never used one. I've seen some pictures of it, but I didn't know what the 4848 was. I didn't know what it was. So I looked it up on Sweetwater and I realized that the Presonus Quantum 4848, which we have one here, is a D-sub in and out for using hardware, just like the Apollo x16. So now the thing about the Quantum, Quantum is a 32, it's a 4848, it's 32 in, 32 out on D-sub connectors, and there's also some ADAT, but for my use case, it's 32 in, 32 out. Just like the Apollo x16s, however, the Apollo x16 is only 16 in and 16 out. And I said to them, oh, wow, if you guys have a Quantum laying around and you want to send it over, I'd love to test it out against the Apollo. I'd love to try it, send it. So they did. They sent me a Quantum 4848 right here. This is on loan. This is not mine. They didn't give this to me for free, but they are allowing me to use it to do this little bit of a test. And if I want to keep it, I'd have to buy it certainly, but it wasn't given to me free of charge. So just so you know that, but they sent it to me for demo purposes. So I said, great, this will be a good test to see what the differences are. Now let's talk a little bit about a little bit of the backstory here. So when I first put this studio together 6 or 8 months ago, and if you're watching this, more than likely you've been watching since the beginning, and I so appreciate that you've done that. You've seen the journey of me shopping for the console, buying all the equipment, getting everything set up. You've watched me and Dave, my buddy Dave and Dave, roll around on the floor and hook up all the wires and show you how to connect all this stuff together. And then we've done some gear demos and we've done some features walkthrough on the console and stuff like that. When I was picking out all this gear, I chose to go with the Apollo 16Xs. And because they were 16 in, 16 out, I needed 2 of them to be able to do 32 in, 32 out on the console, because this is a 32 channel console. Now you may say, and some people asked me even in the earlier videos, hey, why did you pick the Apollos? X16s, why didn't you pick Apogee, or why didn't you pick Burl converters? Or no one mentioned the Quantum, but they mentioned some other companies. And I said, well, honestly, the only reason why I chose the Universal Audio Apollos was for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a Universal Audio fanboy and have been for a long time. I love their plugins. I've had several Apollos on my in-the-box rig. I have UAD2 satellites. I've been using them since the seems like since the late 90s, early 2000s. I've been using them a long, long time. I know they make high quality stuff, and I just went with something that I knew. Yes, did some researching on the pricing. At the time of purchase, those X16s were about $3,800 US a piece. They've gone up considerably since then. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I just bought what I knew. And I love them. They sound great. There's nothing wrong with them. And also, too, I knew that I had some DSP power and stuff in there so I could use some plugins, which, again, we'll talk about in a second. So that's why I bought them. For no other reason. I bought what I knew. I knew it was going to work well. I knew Universal Audio makes high-quality stuff, so on and so forth. So now as I get introduced to this Quantum by Presonus, I start looking at the differences, and I start thinking about, well, how am I using my I/O? And if there's no difference in sounds between something like the Quantum and the Apollo, does it make sense to have money tied up in the Apollos when I'm not really using a good portion of the features on this particular mixing rig? So let me explain. So let's talk about the differences between the UA, pros and cons of the UA Apollo, and pros and cons of the Presonus Quantum as I see it. Let's assume for a second that the converters are exactly the same and that they sound identical, because both of these units, both the X16 and the Presonus Quantum 4848, 4848 don't have any preamps in them. They're not, you don't plug a microphone into them and record through them. You can patch in a hardware preamp and do that if you'd like. Or in my case, I'm using all the preamps on my SSL. I'm not recording through them. So all I'm really using the x16s for, or any I/O, is just for that, for the outputs and then the inputs. So you're looking for the D to A and A to D converters. Outside of that, there's really nothing that really matters to me as far as the way this particular setup is with my particular use case. So keep that in mind. So let's talk about the differences. So the UA Apollo. Now they're not exactly apples to apples between the Apollo and the Quantum in that the UA Apollo obviously has DSP chips in there for their plugins, which I love, right? Just talked about that, love them. However, on this particular mixing rig, I don't use a lot of universal audio plugins in my DAW. As I became mixing more and more with that, I'm really not using hardly any. I have now enough hardware compressors in my rack. I have plenty of EQs, 32 channels of EQ on the board. Occasionally I'll use one of their reverbs. Their Lexicon reverb's really good. And there's a couple of plugins that I might use in the DAW, but they're very few. So the fact that it has the DSP for the plugins, which is great, but it's way more than what I need and what I use. The other pro about the UA Apollo is they just have a history and a reputation of making real high quality product, right? They always do. From their lowest unit, their solos and the Aero interfaces, all the way up to the x16s, they don't make bad products. Not that Presonus does, but they don't make bad products. UA has a history of making high quality stuff. As I said, another pro to the UA is I'm a fanboy. As I said, I love their stuff. I have a history with their stuff. I never had a single problem with any of their products or interfaces, and I'm not sponsored by them in any way. I have no affiliation with them, no relationship with them. I pay for every piece of gear. As a matter of fact, I've tried to have an artist relationship with them many times over the years. They don't even respond to me, care about me in any way, shape, or form. Although I'm sure they appreciate me being a customer, as UA appreciates all their customers. So those are the pros. The cons, if you want to call them that, again, for this particular use case, is that each one of these X16s today, as I record this video on Sweetwater, are $4,500 each. Okay, they were $3,800 when I bought them 6 months ago, but depending on when you're watching this video, I'm recording this video at the end of December of 2021. And everybody knows with everything that's going on in the world today, supply chain issues, COVID, inflation in this country, everything has gone up significantly. As a matter of fact, fun little fact, this particular SSL console 6 months ago cost me $49,000 even. I think that's what I paid for it. Today, it's a $60,000 console. You want to buy it brand new. So everything is going up. But the price of the Apollos are $4,500 for 16 in and 16 out. Okay. It also takes up 7 spaces of rack space. I have 3 of these, by the way, right? I have 3 of them because I'm running a 48 in, 48 out. So I have 3 of them. Takes up 7 spaces. And you may say, well, why, Dave? The Apollos are just one rack space thick, tall. That's true, but they need ventilation. They ventilate through the top, so I don't stack them on top of each other. So between each one of those 3 units, I have an empty space here, okay? So it's taking up lots of rack space for cooling purposes, okay? So that's kind of some of the, I wouldn't say that's a con, it just is what it is. That's some of the pros and some of the cons, if you want to call them that, for the Apollo. Now let's talk about the Presonus Quantum for a minute. So the Presonus Quantum, a pro is, this unit is 32 in, 32 out. Where I said an Apollo X16 is only 16 in and out. So it's twice as many inputs and outputs. This unit, as I sit here today, brand new, is $1,500 US, okay? Which is 6 times less cost than 2 Apollo X16s. In order to get 32 in and 32 out on the Apollo X16s, if I bought them today, it's $9 grand, $4,500 each. These are $1,500 each. Okay, 6 times less money if we're just talking about I/O. On the Quantum, there's no need to have to run like the console app that you need to run with UA. Not that that's a problem, but it's another piece of software that sits between the DAW and the unit. Not that that's an issue, but I believe it does require the Presonus Universal Control app, and I got to check that out when we hook this thing up, okay? But that's just some of the differences. This unit will only take up 2 spaces. It's a 1 space, 1 U tall, just like the Apollos. And if I got 2 of these to replace my other 2, it would only take up 2 spaces because there's no cooling on the top of this. These can be stacked in a rack right on top of each other, no problem. Not that the Universal Audio Apollo cannot, but they do need to be cooled and ventilated, so I put a space between there to be safe. And also, too, again, just a small point, the Universal Audio Apollo is at least another half of these things deeper in the rack, where this is a much shallower, you see it that way maybe, shallower depth-wise. Again, not that that's a problem, just a fact, okay? So those are some of the physical differences. So we have 32 I/O. So if you wanted 64, 2 of these, I would have 64 in, 64 out. I have 3 x16s now, and that only gives me 48 in, 48 out. So I would gain another 16 in and out just by getting a second one of these if you were so inclined to do that. And once again, this will only take up 2 rack spaces, not 7. So those are kind of the differences between the Apollo and the Quantum. Now, again, as I said, the way we're kind of using this here is in Studio One. As you know, we route all the stuff out of the outputs into the console, and then we mix through the console and the hardware, and then it goes back in on a print track on the in Studio One, right? So we have 2 tracks going in. If we print our 8 stereo stems here, that's another 16. So I have 16 inputs plus the 2 for the print track is 18 inputs is all I really use here. But the most important one is the print track, 2 in. So so we route everything out Studio One. So now my first thing was, well, maybe the converters are going to be better in the Apollo. You would hope that they would be for the price difference. Now, when we think about converters, the way I kind of understand it, and really the most important part to a converter for me when you go from digital to analog and then analog back to digital, is that a more high quality, better built converter is going to have more headroom. Means you can push it a lot harder. It's not going to distort as easy. And when you're working all in the box or recording through those converters and mixing all in the box, that makes sense to me. You want a converter that has some headroom. You can push it a little bit more, and you don't have to worry about clipping your converters and creating a converter that maybe doesn't sound good. But in this particular use case, because we're coming out of our Apollo in this case, and we're hitting the board, we're actually coming out of the outputs actually at a pretty conservative level. We're not nearly clipping the converters on the way out on purpose. Actually, on the output side in Studio One, you can see here, hopefully on the screen, I'll put up an image. You can see I have here, if I were to play this audio back quickly, you'll see that we're not clipping the converters at all. We actually turned them down because I want to be able to give myself enough headroom coming into the console where I can actually drive the input of the SSL and get more of the color of the board. So we're coming out of the converters at a very conservative rate to allow me to really jack up the preamp on the console, run it through all the analog hardware, and then when we're coming back into the converting it again now from analog back to digital, back into Studio One and a print track, we're only coming in somewhere probably around -6 dB. We're not even coming close to clipping it, okay? So therefore, the headroom maybe isn't as important because of the way we're being conservative on both the output side and the input side, and we're letting most of the drive being done by the console. At least that's my way of thinking. If that logic completely doesn't make sense to someone that knows more than me, leave it in the comments below. Again, this is a learning experience for me. We're learning on camera here, Dave and I, who Dave's not here with me today, but we're learning this and bringing this to you as we're learning. We're figuring this stuff out as we're going, and we're trying to educate ourselves and hopefully maybe educate some of you. So that being said, I don't know that the converter quality is as important. The converter in the Apollo, they claim that it's pristine, nice and clean. It's not going to color the sound in any way, and that's what we want. And the Presonus Quantum literature will say the same thing. It's a pristine, clean, kind of a transparent conversion. You shouldn't hear your converter, is what I'm saying. So the test that we're going to do is I have a small session here that's on the first 16 channels, the first 2 buckets of the SSL. It's only 16 channels. We are going to set all the EQs completely flat. We are going to set the preamps at a certain level where we're hitting the board at a pretty good rate. We're going to take off, there's no inserts, no hardware. We've bypassed the bus compressor. We bypassed the SSL fusion. There are no effects on this session whatsoever. My goal is to run this song from top to bottom. The only thing we're going to do is I'm going to mix it on the faders, try to balance a little bit, maybe a little bit of panning to just make it, but we're not going to EQ it. We're not going to compress it. We're not going to do anything. Just run the raw audio, 16 tracks, first through the 16 channels, bypass all the master bus stuff, print that back into Studio One through the Apollo. Then I'm going to disconnect one of those Apollos. I'm going to put those same 16 channels on the Quantum and do the same thing. Don't touch anything on the board. Run it through the same signal path and print that track back in. And then we'll be able to listen to one that was run through the Apollo, one that was run through the Quantum. Is there any difference in sound? Can we hear any difference? If I level match the audio, it should, in a perfect world, it should sound exactly the same. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If it does, then I have to ask myself, does it make sense to have 3 Apollo x16s, which will cost over $12,000 for all 3, or do I go out and spend $3,000 and buy 2 Quantums? And if I get 2 Quantums, I'll have an additional 16 in and out. I'll take up less rack space, and that will leave me with a pile of money left over if I sell them on the used market that I can invest maybe in some more gear. Wouldn't that be fun from an economic standpoint? However, it has to sound the same. If it sounds like crap and it's cheap conversion or whatever the case might be, and I can hear a difference, then there's no reason for me to downgrade just for money because I've already paid for the Apollos. They're already paid for. I like them. I have no problem with them. But this would be an interesting test. And so I don't know what we're going to find. I have no clue. So that's what we're going to do. Okay? So now you know the backstory. Now you know why we're doing it. Now you know how I'm going to do it. So what I'm going to do now is we're probably going to pause the camera here. I'm going to get everything set up, and I'm going to do just that. I'm going to run it through on both, and then I'll come back and I'll play them back and forth so you can hear the difference. And then you can leave a comment below and say, which one do you think sounds better? Which one do you think is one or the other? I'm not going to tell you which one's which. You guys decide if you could hear any difference at all. It'll be interesting to see what we find out. So I'll be back in a few minutes and we will get on with the test. Okay, so welcome back. So now I got everything set up in Studio One to run the first pass through and to record our first track. So as I said a few minutes ago, everything is coming out of Studio One. I'm going to show you the routing and how much we're actually hitting the converters on the way out of the interface. We'll show that to you in a second, but the way the board is set up, all I've done is done a basic static mix with some panning. All the EQs are completely flat. There's no EQ, there's no compression, no hardware inserted at all, except the fact that it's running through the SSL. The way I'm hitting the board coming in on the meter bridge is I'm driving it. I'm not using the drive circuit. I'm using the non-drive circuit on the SSL, which has less compression. It's more transparent, more clean, and we're hitting it at a pretty good level. So I'll show that to you now. So if I start playing back Studio One here, you'll see the outputs here. So here's the output side over here in black. These are the outputs going out of the interface into the SSL. So if I start playing back this, and even at the chorus section, you'll see that I've turned down all the outputs about a -5.5 dB. We're not even coming close to clipping these things on the way out. Clipping the outputs, not even close. And I do that, as I said earlier, so I can drive the preamp on the console a little bit harder. That's why we're doing it that way. When you take a look at the print track on the way back in, which is over here on the left-hand side, if I show you that at the chorus section, we're coming back into Studio One at about a -12, which is, again, ultra conservative. We're not clipping anything even coming close to coming back in. So we should be good. So if I record this now from the beginning and just record it. We're not clipping on the way out. We're not clipping on the way in. We have no processing at all. Here is the first recording, and then I'll maybe speed up the video. I'll stop it halfway through, and then once we do the second recording, we'll come back and we'll listen to the test. But I wanted to show you the outputs and the inputs, and between the two interfaces, when I reconnect one to the other, I'm not going to touch anything. It's going to be exactly the same. Okay, so here we go. Let's record this thing and let's get it into Studio One on our print track.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back?
Okay guys, we're back. So we're back here in Studio One. So here's where I ended up. So I ran one of the mixes, as I said earlier, through the Apollo x16. And then I disconnected the Apollo, I hooked up the Quantum, did the same exact test, nothing else changed on the board. I didn't touch a single thing. Again, raw audio tracks, just some panning and some balance on the SSL. The EQs are dead flat, the high pass filters are dead flat. It's just a raw track. All the hardware, everything has been bypassed, so you're just hearing the audio coming through the SSL and back in, out of the converters, into the board, back into the converters. If we take a look here in Studio One, what I did is I then imported those two tracks. In purple we have mix 1, and in green we have mix 2. I normalized the audio to make sure they're exactly the same volume. And when we play these back, you'll be able to see on the master bus, we're hitting about a -3 dB from normalizing the audio. Coming back in on the print track, when I recorded the print track, we're coming in around a -8, -10. You already saw how we were going out of the converter. So again, none of that stuff has changed. All we really did was just swap out one set of IO for another, okay? So now I'm going to play this back. I'm not going to tell you which one is which. You leave comments below and you tell me which one you like better, if you think one is the other. And that's it. So keep your eye on the on the mute buttons here, or the solo buttons here in Studio One, down here in the left-hand corner, because I'm going to click back and forth and solo them up back and forth, and they are as identical in volume as they can possibly get here in the room. So hopefully over YouTube will convey that. So let's play this back and let's see. Here we go. We're going to start with mix 1, and then we're going to go over to mix 2. Keep your eyes on the mute and solo buttons.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright being away from you. I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will me, I lay on my fuse and help me, I think I am falling. Does anybody hear me calling? Help me dry on my tears and help me, I lay on my fuse and help me, I think I am falling. Does anybody hear me calling? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that I left in me. I'm alright, feel away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning out the corner, put it back in order. You know I will always have this too. Yeah. I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that I left in me. I'm alright, feel away from you. Yeah. I'll be fine. Cleaning out the corner, put it back in order. You know I will always have this too. Be a piece of you.
Okay, there you go. So which one do you think is which? Leave comments below. Do you hear a difference between those two mixes? They're identically the same volume in the room. I checked this to try to make this as accurate as humanly possible. Again, you heard in the beginning of the video the way we set it up. So the question then becomes, is there a sound difference quality-wise? Right? We're just talking about the A to D and D to A. Once again, the Quantum is a $1,500 unit, US dollars, for 32 in, 32 out. To get that same equivalent in the Apollos, you need two x16s, and those are $4,500 each. So you're talking about $9,000 worth of I/O versus $1,500 worth of I/O. Again, the Apollo's got more features and the plugins and all that. We talked about that in the beginning of the video. It's not exactly the same unit. They're different units. But for this particular use case, where I'm just using it to get the audio out of the DAW into the board and back into the DAW, what's the only really component that would really change the game? It would be the conversion. And again, we're not hitting the converters very hard in and out because we're doing most of that on the SSL. So, leave comments below. Let me know if you heard a difference, and if you did, what did you like? What didn't you like? It's all cool. It's all valid. Everyone's opinion matters. And I'd be interested to hear. And maybe in a week or so, I'll do a follow-up and I'll let you know which one was which. But listen to it, and you let me know in the comments what you guys think. And let me know what you thought of this test. And if you thought this test wasn't done fairly, or if you thought this test was not done accurately, I'm not really too sure what I could have done differently. I mean, I guess you can always do something a little bit different, but in the end, I think it's a pretty good test, pretty good comparison. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you learned something and you found it informative. So I want to thank you so much for sticking around and watching the video. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Go out to mixingmusicanalog.com, see what I have going on over there. And until the next video, I've been Dave with Mixing Music Analog at mixingmusicanalog.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.